Welcome back to the Bayside Fabrication YouTube channel. So today, I just want to talk to you guys about the plan for this car. Now, this car runs great, sounds great. The power and power delivery and everything is really nice, smooth. It's just a great overall car. I really enjoy it. However, it's not the thrill, I guess you could say, that I'm used to for a driving experience. I need something with a little more gusto. So we need to engine swap this. Now, some of you might be asking, why am I engine swapping this car? Well, the reason for that is this motor in this car is worth about $9,000 as is, with 90,000 miles on it. Now, that's a lot of money for a used motor. And with that being said, this motor is only rated right now at right around 300 horsepower approximately, and to hot rod this motor is astronomically expensive. I mean, I think just a basic rebuild kit on this thing is like, geez, I don't know, $15,000 to rebuild it or something like that, start to finish, if you had to bring it to machine shop and all that kind of stuff. So it's just really not a budget-friendly motor. And like I said, there's so many people who lose their motors on these cars and they want to replace it, that the demand is there for a good running engine. So I think that's my plan. The next question is, what are we going to put in it? Well, I thought about the LS route. LS would sound great. It actually fits really well in the engine bay. But I mean, who cares about LSs? I know so many people with LSs, and I guess they're fine, but everybody I know with LS, it's always running weird, or they're blowing up their motors, or I don't know. They don't really quite do it for me. What is intriguing to me is these little guys. Y'all might be familiar. This one's been collecting dust in the corner here. And this is a K24A2 I pulled out of the junkyard. Now, I paid $450 for that motor, or $400 for that motor. And as many of you know, the Honda K series with boost is very capable of, I mean, 1,000 horsepower, 600-700 horsepower relatively easily, E85, and you know, some internal work. So I think that's going to be our plan. I think we're going to K swap this perfectly good, perfectly running 996. Now, before you guys get all upset about putting a Honda motor in a Porsche, keep in mind this car is kind of been gone through. I mean, it's got a fiberglass bumpers. It's, you know, it's had it had a very small accident at one point, but with that being said, someone replaced the headlights and it looks like both fenders were painted, so at least that was done. It's got some paint fade. The interior's, it's nice, but you know, it's whatever. Very basic car, and not perfect by any means. So my opinion is it's a great candidate to hot rod. I mean, it has all the things I'm looking for. It's a 911, which I always wanted, and the reality is getting 600-700 horsepower of this motor is not going to happen. So let's just meet our goals and get wild with a higher horsepower setup. So the Honda motor, I mean, if I hurt that motor, it's only, you know, it's a $400 block. I mean, it's not a big deal at all. And also, my thought process on the Honda motor is I'm only dealing now with 4 fuel injectors, 4 pistons, 4 rods, et cetera, as opposed to, like, say, LS, where it's, you know, 8 of everything, and the cost is just literally times 2. So I think it just makes sense. It really does. The worst part about it is it's going to sound like a Honda which I'm not really thrilled about because this car just sounds so good. I can give up a little noise, love the flat 6 noise for, you know, an extra 400 or 500 horsepower. So that's kind of where we're at, guys. We're gonna K-swap this car, and I guess we just gotta start buying some parts. So since we decided we're K-swapping this thing, the next thing to do is start getting parts for it. What I do need first and foremost is to get the adapter plate and flywheel, at least the ball rolling on ordering that, because it's a 4 to 5 week wait time, and that is going to be one of the main components of this swap. Kennedy Engineering sells one. It's 1,800 bucks. It's not cheap, but they're the only game in town, and it's going to make this whole deal much easier, as opposed to me trying to make my own adapter plate and things like that. Honestly, it's just worth buying, and if it's something I want to look at and, you know, see if it's something I can do in the future for future builds or something like that, maybe that's a idea. But honestly, for the money, it's really not worth the aggravation of trying to reinvent the wheel, and I also don't have the equipment to really do any of that. So while we're waiting for that to be built, I'm going to order that probably next coming week, and while we're waiting for that to be built, it's just time to collect parts. I'm going to source piston rods, turbo, all that stuff. I haven't really decided which route I'm going to go on that. I thought it'd be cool to kind of mimic the turbo specs as like Boosted Boy Kyle with his old MR2 setup, because it would just be rad having twin turbos hanging out the back bumper. However, I'm not sure if that's really the right move performance wise. A single 62, 66 or something like that would be a really nice setup on this motor, very capable of that 700 horsepower goal that we're kind of shooting for. So yeah, that's the move. Oh, and another reason, just to kind of reiterate why I'm thinking K over like a LS, is this transmission should be able to hold, they say around 600 horsepower ish. You know, I'm going to shoot for 6 or 7, see how it goes, but this transmission is not as robust as the 996 turbo transmission, so we're kind of see how that goes. And with that being said, the K has significantly less torque than a LS or something would apply, and torque is really what's gonna be a hammer on this setup. So not as much of a torquey motor, I think, will really help preserve the transmission that's in this car, and that way we don't have to start going down that road of, you know, custom built transaxles and things like that. So that's the plan, guys. Let's get building this K series. I wanted to show you what I picked up at the junkyard yesterday. Now, this is my second one. I already have one, but this is a K24A2. Now, I'm gonna just degrease this right now, pressure wash it, and get it all cleaned up, and then start inspecting it. Pulled another K24 out of the junkyard, back in May, and I pulled the valve cover on this one after I cleaned it, and it looked like it had about 1 million miles on it. So it's not a bad thing. I'm sure it's totally fine. But this one, I think, has a lot less miles on it. The car that was at the junkyard wasn't wrecked or anything, so I don't know if it had a transmission problem or what the deal was. But anyways, that's the story with that motor. So I figured we'll pull this one out, keep that other one as a backup, take whatever parts we need off it, and just kind of have 2 motors to make one, and then I'll sell off whatever we don't use. But as of now, I'm going to pressure wash this guy and get it cleaned up and see what we're dealing with here. But pretty excited about starting this swap. All right, we just gave this thing the super clean treatment. I'm going to hose it off. Got my supervisor. Buddy, man, super clean is the good stuff. So we got this all cleaned up now and ready to start messing with. It's better to do it now than start pulling stuff off, and then you just wind up getting all greasy and gross. So we just freaking sent it with the old super clean and pressure washer treatment. Let it air out a little bit, but pretty clean looking motor so far. I mean, obviously it's what's inside that counts, but you know, overall it looks like it's in pretty good shape. Okay, we have our freshly degreased motor, and I don't have an engine stand at the moment. It's one of those things that I barely work on, you know, building motors and stuff. So if I had an engine stand, it goes away quickly because it just takes up space for a couple years, and they're like 40 bucks. Anyways, here we have it. This came out of a 2004 Acura TSX. Now this is the K24A2, which can be identified here. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a stamping on the block there. So that's the first thing you do, is just make sure it's the actual motor that's in the vehicle. 9 times out of 10, 9.999 times out of 10, it is going to be. So this is the 2.4 liter version. In the RSX, they made the 2 liter. So that is just obviously they're the same heads and everything, but it's a 2 liter version. This is the 2.4. So this is a torquier version, and this is really the one that's going to be the best suited for our application. So what I'm going to do for now is just kind of go through and just remove all the accessories, hoses, and get a good idea of how this motor's looking. Like I said, I cleaned it up, and everything cleaned up actually pretty well. This car was hit in the front, and I'll show you a picture of that now. So when it was hit, it actually just made contact right to here. You can see where it pushed in the AC line, but that's it. It actually didn't even contact the alternator, and it was also up against the manifold, but there was no damage. So the motor is intact, and actually I picked up another K24A2. So this motor I picked up in May from the junkyard, and the car that it came out of wasn't hit, or there was no obvious signs of damage, so I kind of got a little nervous about it. I pulled the valve cover and everything, and it looked good. It was a little dirty. It probably has a bunch of miles on it. So it's a good core, it's a good base. This motor, I have my fingers crossed that this will be a little more cleaner of a motor, let's say. And being that the car was there because it was in an accident is going to also lead me to assume that this motor is probably in running condition as opposed to that one. Both motors were $400. So it's not a big deal at all to me. I can sell this motor fully dressed right now for probably 1,200 bucks. I could sell it tomorrow. But what I'm gonna do is just scavenge the good parts. This one here, I wound up just cutting the wiring harness on. It was a automatic car anyways, so I can't use this harness anyways. And that harness is also from an automatic, but that one's intact. So we'll see how it goes, but either way, I'm gonna strip this motor down a little bit, get it to, you know, pull the exhaust off and everything, and just kind of get a feel of where it's at. I'm gonna try to bore scope the cylinders, check those out, pull the plugs, etc., etc. But either way, this motor's gotta be stripped down regardless. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm not gonna bore you with all the details of that, but we're just gonna start pulling this thing apart and see how it looks. But I'm pretty happy with how clean it is, to be honest with you, so far. It also came with, you know, just little goodies like this. The starter motor on it is brand new, so we got that. Yeah, we're just gonna see how it all looks. So I'm gonna start pulling it apart, label and throw everything in a bin, and see what this little guy has in store for us. Pretty excited. All right, guys. So we got her pretty well torn down here. Everything's looking good. And now it's kind of the moment of truth. Just a little sticky. And inspect this guy. Okay. All right. My box of parts. Okay. Not great, but also not bad. It's got compression. Just by pulling it over, the plugs are still in it. So what I'm going to do now is just inspect everything here. You know, basic stuff. Make sure all the valves are connected. You can't see, but you can almost see into the cylinder on this one. So we're just gonna do an overall visual inspection. Obviously, the first thing I did when I saw this motor at the junkyard was I did put a wrench on it and turned it over manually just to make sure the engine turns over and it wasn't seized or anything. But everything's looking pretty good, actually. It's definitely got some miles on it, but I don't think it's anything crazy. Once this is all cleaned up, I mean, it's gonna be mint. So I'm doing is just rubbing my fingernail along the cam profile, see if there's any ridges or lips, which they're not. And yeah, we're just checking her out. But we're gonna be pulling this head off anyways. I'm gonna be doing valve springs and retainers, piston and rods. So we're gonna have to get this thing pretty well torn apart and get it all back together. But my biggest thing now is I don't know anything about these motors. Well, I know a little bit about these, but I don't know a ton. So I'm gonna have to do a bunch of research starting like yesterday. I do know from when we did the smart car that I will need to upgrade to a RSX Type S oil pump. That's a big one. Also, just all the basic stuff. You know, I got to figure out, you know, I can kind of figure out what stuff does, but I'm not sure exactly what every single sensor does, you know, locations and things like that. So I just really need to familiarize myself with this motor. These would obviously appear to be cam angle sensors, so that's pretty easy. That looks like a knock sensor. Other than that, this thing's pretty straightforward, and it's a little guy. I mean, geez, put a tape measure on this thing. What we got? "20 inches from the back of the block to the front." Add another 6 for the water pump accessories. So, yeah. I'm gonna pull the plugs now and see how they look. All right, just pulled the plugs. Let's check these suckers out. Well, it had iridium plugs in it. Pretty well worn out. I mean, they're worn, but they look fine. All right. So far, so good. No surprises. So I'll pull the oil filter off now and see if there's any metal in it or anything like that. All right, guys, so I want to check out this oil filter. And I've never had the tools to inspect one of these properly. And I was like, ah, crud, I'm not going to be able to see the contents of it. But we're going to get something to try that I saw on the old YouTubes where you can just cut this sucker with some shears, some sheet metal shears. It's gonna work. So what you do is just cut down straight, this rolled edge, and then just cut right along that bottom bead here. And once this is cut off, we should be able to inspect this oil filter. So obviously you can't use a hacksaw or sawzall or angle grinder, anything, because it's going to create metal bits, and then you're not going to know what the hell you're looking at. This is pretty neat. And that's one, you know, one freaking good thing about, oh yeah, it's coming apart right now. One good thing about the internet is stuff like this. I would never thought of that. Now I'm just gonna go in here and inspect. Pull open these vanes. See if there's any kind of shimmering, which I don't see at all. It's hard to do it with one hand, but so far I don't see any evidence of anything in here, any metallics or anything like that. So nothing glaring, which is great. I mean, if there's no oil, no metal particulates in this filter, then, and it has good compression, then this motor's going to be mint. So I think we got a good one here, guys. I think it's worth pulling this apart even more and inspecting to see what the internals actually look like. But all right, guys, I think that's gonna do it for tonight. I have to go learn a lot more about this motor. I'm gonna go sit in front of the computer for a couple hours and really figure out how these K-series work. They're just like any other motor from what I'm seeing. I mean, everything's pretty straightforward, but you know, I'm a BMW guy pretty much, so not having worked on a Honda in the past 20 years, you know, and obviously the Hondas I was working on were nothing as advanced as this. So yeah, I'm just gonna check things out, but so far everything's looking great. I mean, the motor looks really clean. Not really clean, but it looks clean enough for what we're doing here. So I'm pretty fired up. We're gonna get this thing freaking ripping. Thanks, guys. See you on the next one.